Welcome back to episode 2 of MetaWell. My name is Adam Froerer.
I'm Cecil Walker.
So we did an inaugural episode about what is well-being. And now we're going to take this kind of deeper dive. Why should we care about it? Why should we focus on well-being? And we talked a little bit about this last time. But if you had to boil down, I don't know why I'm always asking you to boil things down, but I am. I'm asking you.
That's what I'm wondering. All those years of school you went to and you still got questions.
It's true. I don't know if I'll ever run out of questions. But if I ask you to boil down, why do we care about well-being? Why focus on it? Why attend to it?
Well, I think what we started to get into at the end of the last one was how this touches every aspect of your life, of anyone's life. And so well-being isn't just, I eat a couple of vegetables, or I go to the spa, or I did a sit-up the other week. It can't be isolated if you're really taking it, very seriously. It can't be isolated to very minute tasks or just incidents. It's living. You summarized it very well at the end of this first episode last time, where you basically said to be human and to be human well is well-being. And so if you're living well, and the entirety of that living is speaking to this being a particular kind of version of yourself, that's always going to be very, very different than one particular specific intervention. Maybe that's a component to your well-being. Maybe that helps set you on the right track, but I don't think that's the entirety of it. It's all of you. It's your living. It's your day-to-day. And so since you're always going to have another day, another more to it, you're better off, I think, investing in, maybe I should be living well. Maybe I should be happy while I'm doing it. Maybe I should feel good. Maybe I should feel like I'm kind of in harmony, at peace with, all the things that are happening.
One of the things that you just made me think, and I think this will kind of get us up to a bit, is we're going to consider well-being hopefully in a really rich, deep way. And you just mentioned being human, doing humanness well, which obviously begs the question of well, what does that mean? If I'm going to be a good human, if I'm going to do humanness well, what does that mean? And I think one of the things that really stands out to me is that there's both an individual quality to it and there's a relational quality to it. If I'm being well, then I am striving in some sense to be at my very best, to reach my peak physical performance or ability, to reach my highest mental or intellectual capacity, to be managing emotion well, to regulating my own sense of self well. Even as I say that, I can imagine some people being like, well, that's impossible, or that's such a big task, or that could be really overwhelming, or whatever. And I think one of the things that I would really want to emphasize is it's not necessarily attainment, because even if you think about like physical health and doing it the very best that you can, well, my very best today is going to be very different than my very best in a year from now. If I consistently run, then my rate of running is going to go up, or my ability for distance is going to go up, or whatever. That doesn't mean that I wasn't doing my best. It just means that my best continues to change. And so I think there's an individual aspect around it of me striving for my best and whatever my best is for that day. But I also think that doing humanness well, being well, means that I interact with others in a really meaningful way. That we as people are interactive. We're social beings. There's tons of research that supports we need interaction. We thrive on positive interaction. We are our best when we are reinforced by other people. If all I do is focus on me and achieving my very best, I've left a huge component of well-being unattended to, and that is how I interact with others, how I relate to others, what my relationships are like. And well-being research oftentimes focuses on the individual. Do you have financial security? How is your mental health? What is your life satisfaction like? But I think when we consider wellness and being human well, if we don't take into consideration an interactional component, we're leaving a huge chunk of wellness out of the equation.
What you said about how you can't, it's not about achievement when you say, here's what I want for my well-being. I want to be this, I want to accomplish this thing. But then the process of engaging with that isn't about achievement. And I think that's very insightful and very true. And I think that'll keep coming back in our conversations. But it made me laugh a little because I was thinking of like when I go to the gym, I just go to like LA Fitness, like regular gym, lots of regular other people. And everyone's there kind of more or less doing the same thing, trying to be healthy, trying to, move towards this positive goal of getting healthier, getting fitter. But there's always like, that one guy that comes in who's like built like an action figure, like a superhero CGI. Just seems like every muscle is as big as possible everywhere on his whole body. And he's like, moving weights where like it's loaded up to the maximum weight. And you're like, well, surely that guy's done. He finished. He accomplished. If it's possible, if we're working towards achievement, he did it. He has finished fitness. But I think that kind of illustrates how silly it is because you that's just not how it works. You're not finished. You're not done. If you want to reach, you described emotional self-management really well, to have that inner peace, to have that, sense of self and that control of self. It'd be nice to think of yourself as being done, but are you ever really done? It's not achievement based. And then there was, of course, your larger point of this has to be interactional, because it almost won't really mean as much if it's only unidimensional. I don't know if that's a word, but if it's only you and your needs and one track, that's all I'm doing this for, and that's all I'm getting out of it. Because I don't think it's really possible to get very far that way in a strictly individual pursuit. And two, I don't think it'll feel like you've actually done anything, even if you do somehow get very far. It won't feel like there's any accomplishment to it. There's nothing that was interactional about it. There's nothing engaging. There's no one to share it with or do it on or for. Or I think all of the things that bring us lots of sense of meaning are in some way connected to other people or to purposes that are beyond ourselves. And I think well-being, it also has to be kind of like that. If you ask people what's the most important things that they put effort into, what's the thing that makes their life really feel like it's worth living, it'll always be, raising my children. It'll always be, I'm trying to help the next generation. I'm trying to save the planet. I'm trying to improve and move us forward in this type of a way. It's always something well beyond yourself, because I think if you get too bogged down with, well, I'm just trying to, have a really nice steak dinner or something. I'm just trying to line my pockets as much as possible. Yeah, I don't really think people would give that as their honest answer, but you could see how those things feel a little bit emptier, because it's like, well, maybe you check that box, but then what? And how good do you really feel about that, right? You had a steak dinner, but now what? Is that it? Is that all you really wanted from all of this? Instead of working in a communal kind of a sense or for a communal purpose, all you did was kind of tear other people down or ignore other people. You can kind of see how it really lacks that sense of fulfillment that we might really inherently be associating with well-being. I took us on a couple of detours, so it's your job to get us back on track. What are these other other ways of looking at well-being? Because I think there's some key elements to it, some key ways of really deciphering and understanding it.
If we look at overall well-being and some of the things that we're going to consider in great depth as we go, and we kind of alluded to some of these things like emotional well-being. We're going to think about and talk about like physical well-being. You just briefly mentioned social well-being. And I think, again, that's one of the major components that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about like mental well-being and spiritual well-being and economic or occupational well-being. So I think, again, we're going to kind of take this holistic view. But one of the things that I think is important is, and then why we're considering well-being, we can either attend to well-being proactively or reactively. And I would say if we're reacting, we probably aren't in the greatest place as far as well-being goes. Whereas if we are proactive, that's going to be a bigger indicator of we're in a healthier place. And what I mean by that is in our work, and we've highlighted this a little bit before, but we're therapists. And predominantly in the world of therapy, it's a problem-oriented endeavor. People usually wait until something is wrong. They say, like, my relationship is falling apart, or my emotional state is at a place where I just feel like I can't continue, I can't cope anymore, I don't know how to manage this. And so they wait until the problem has become significant enough that they feel like, okay, I'm not well. And then they reach out to a therapist. And then, interestingly, the societal norm is driven by insurance companies. And the insurance company says, well, in order for them to get help, what you have to do is you have to identify all the things that are wrong with them. What are the symptoms that they're experiencing? What's happening that's causing them to need your help? And so once we've identified what the problem is, then we have to come up with some kind of an intervention to say, now I'm going to fix that problem. I'm going to make that symptom go away. I'm going to alleviate your suffering in some way. And so the point of treatment is symptom reduction. If I can make your symptoms go down, in essence, I can check the boxes and be like, you don't have this anymore, you're not experiencing that anymore, then the insurance company says, great, you've reduced the symptoms enough. There's no longer a need for you to intervene in any way. Let them go. If that's all we do, all we've done is we've said, okay, you no longer are suffering. You're no longer in pain, you're no longer whatever. But we haven't done anything to prevent that from happening again. We haven't gotten to a place where instead of those symptoms, you're experiencing positive aspects, happiness, joy, life satisfaction, thriving. That is not a requirement. And in most cases, insurance companies are not going to pay for you to go to the next step of, now instead of just existing symptom-free, how are you going to thrive? How are you going to exist in happiness, joy, those kinds of things? Our medical approach is really a reactive approach. We only intervene when a problem arises to a level that says, hey, intervention is required. There are now some physicians who are like functional medicine that's coming into play that's saying, like, let's do something in advance. Let's promote health. Let's start eating really wisely. Let's start doing things to, in essence, prevent you from getting sick or prevent you from getting to a place where these symptoms have built up enough that you feel like intervention is necessary. And I think that is a paradigm shift of, we can either do things in advance to prevent unwellness, or we can be reactive to when symptoms occur and try to fix them. Let's do as much proactive, preventative work as we can so that we can avoid getting to a place of symptoms being so prevalent that it's debilitating. And so I think that's one of the other, when people say, why focus on well-being in this way? It's preventative. It's about health. It's about placing ourselves in the best possible place to be able to encounter or maneuver or manage anything that comes our way. Does that mean that we're going to be, immune from needing help? No. I think there are going to be times where even in the pursuit of wellness, we're going to need some help. But hopefully those moments of needing help are shorter, are less extreme, are less dire than if we hadn't done a lot of this preventative work to begin with. And so I think that's one of the other things that I would really emphasize about why do this is hopefully it's going to prepare us, it's going to prevent illness from occurring, where illness doesn't need to occur.
I don't want to dismiss, these kinds of circumstances where people are in need of some type of, okay, we're in a really bad place and I need something to do about this really, really difficult thing that I'm dealing with right now, whether that's in a medical sense, very physically, or in a mental health sense. You need that kind of care, that reactive kind of care in moments like that. But I think the best kind of therapy and the best kind of care in general is exactly what you're describing. It's the kind of care that makes you much more resilient to when problems show up, or the risk of problems, or the threat of problems, right? You want to build a house that can withstand all the weather that might come, rather than living in a house where every week you have to patch a new hole, or fix a thing, or put the roof back on, or build a new window. You have to keep slapping band-aids on the things that come up, when what you're really in need of is entirely different infrastructure. You're in need of really investing in something much more substantial within yourself, within the entirety of your living, really. I mean, the same is with healthcare. Emergency medical care is not the same thing as actually good, high quality, long-term care. You could live your life in a way that you are constantly in good care of yourself, versus what they need to do in the emergency room. Those are very, very different things. And they have their uses, obviously. But you don't want to just find yourself 100% reliant on, well, I'll wait till I have an emergency and then I'll go to the emergency room. That's not how you want to live your life. You want to live your life in a way that says, I hope I never have to go to the emergency room. And I'm going to make that less likely and less necessary, because I'm doing these other things. I'm living my life in this kind of a way over here. Our brains do these big word association things. I think when we say well-being and wellness, people start to think, oh, that's like health and self-care. And health and self-care is the doctor patching me up, or me going to the spa, or me treating myself. It's this very specific, singular intervention on a problem. I have a problem, and that problem, I try to put this thing on that problem. I'm hoping that spa day reverses my exhaustion, or undoes my stress. And maybe it does. Maybe it is helpful, but there's something much, much, much more substantial than a spa day. There's something where you live a life where you don't need to do something about that exhaustion, because you're much more resilient to exhaustion in the first place.
I think sometimes people think, I don't have time, or I don't have energy, or I don't have the money to prevent. I'm kind of always trying to just manage the next thing that's coming. Regardless of where you are, money, energy, effort is going to have to be expended, right? Even if in your example of like, okay, I'm going to go to the spa. Well, it costs money to go to the spa.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I am going to work out, it costs money to go to the gym, right? It takes my time to go to the gym. I might have to get up earlier, or I might have to stay up later, or I might have to skip a social event, or so there's an expense for doing these things. And so I want to be really clear up front, is we're not saying that well-being is effortless. We're not saying that it comes at no cost. There's purpose that goes into it. And so I'm putting the resources where I want the resources to be in a deliberate, meaningful way. And the other analogy that kind of came to me as you were talking was a car. I hate car problems. I hate dealing with, I don't know anything about cars. And so it's hard for me to go to the mechanic and be like, are you sure I need to spend all that money on whatever it is you're telling me?
If you're asking that, you're about to be ripped off.
but I think about it, right? So there are these mile markers. We know that about every 30,000 miles, the belts on a car need to be shifted, or there's filters that need to be replaced, or whatever. And at that 30,000 mile, or at that 100,000 mile mark, when there's these major things, these preventative things, then we have choices and we have to rationalize. Okay, is the expense worth it? And it's this game that we play of okay, should I really put this in? Is it worth putting that in? And I was thinking about it, and let's just say a timing belt. I know a timing belt is like one of the major things. It costs a chunk of change to get it fixed. They usually have to like remove other parts of the engine in order to get the timing belt in just right. But I remember as a kid, my older sister was driving our car and the timing belt busted. Again, my knowledge is limited, so this might be an exaggeration, but this is what I remember. Because she was driving when the timing belt busted, the engine was running. Well, when the timing belt busted, it basically was like a rubber band that like shot, and it shot through the engine because where else does it have to go? And so all of a sudden, this timing belt that's going, X miles an hour is shooting through your engine and it's breaking other pieces of the engine as it's going through. So now the expense has risen exponentially because not only do I have to change that belt or get a new one, but now I have to fix everything that belt hit on the way out. The energy, the effort, the time, the money that I would have put in just to change the belt in the first place, it's expensive, but it prevents additional expenses of everything that it hit on the way out through the motor. And I think the same thing in our well-being is we still have to put in time at the gym. We still might need to go to the spa to find peace, to find relaxation. We might still need to, journal. So there are things that we might need to do that will contribute to well-being. They are costs. They extend effort. But if we're proactive about those activities instead of reactive, then hopefully the cost goes down. Hopefully the effort that is needed or the correction that has to occur goes down. I think going along with what you were saying too, just because I'm doing the preventative work doesn't mean that there might not be an emergency that happens, right? Something might come up from, I have no idea if this is even possible. Again, my car knowledge is horrible. But I might be driving along and I might hit some big rock and the rock shoots up and like breaks the timing belt. And the timing belt might still like rip through my engine. Again, no idea if that's even possible. So emergencies might happen and I might still have to then repair. But the likelihood of a rock puncturing a brand new timing belt is probably much less than a rock puncturing an old timing belt. And so if we replace things, if we do the work in advance, the likelihood of emergency goes down. And I think that's one of the components of well-being that we're kind of looking at is, are we being proactive enough to put ourselves in the best place, one, to prevent whatever comes up, and two, to be able to cope with it in the best way possible when an emergency occurs. And that kind of speaks to the benefits of why attend to well-being.
Everything that we've been saying so far, actually, you've been doing the heavy lifting. I've been enjoying this.
Well, now
But
I'm going to
collectively,
shut up and I'm not going to say anything else.
no. That's not how this works. Collectively, between the two of us, everything that we've been saying so far, I think point out two really big things that are helpful to be aware of, given I feel like the current environment of how people tend to address wellness and well-being. One, we talked a lot about how this is an ongoing thing. This is a lifestyle. This is something you are committing to. You're becoming the thing that you're trying to be. It's well becoming, not well-being. Your book that you're working on, and I think that flies in the face of this. There's this kind of this online culture of do this thing and it'll fix you, or take this thing, eat this thing, and this will fix your problems. And I can understand why people want to buy into that because it sounds really, really nice. All I have to do is start like eating that thing that this person says, or taking this supplement, or just doing this one thing, a nice, simple, easy fix. I would love that. And I think that's how it draws people in. But what we've been saying is kind of the opposite of that. that this is a whole lifestyle. This is a thing that you have to kind of, a system you sign yourself up for. This is you building infrastructure. This is you investing in the future. And it's not going to be just a one singular thing. The other component to this is that kind of have to be willing to spend the effort. You kind of have to be willing to say, I have limited resources. I have limited time. There certainly have limited money. I have limited attention. I've limited willpower, even as metaphorical as that sounds. I think psychologically, you literally do have a finite amount of willpower. You do too much, and you don't feel like doing much else. You have to be able to say, I'm going to use that for the promotion of my well-being, rather than saying I'm gonna skip that. I don't want to spend it on those things, either because you feel like you don't have it or because you feel like you just don't want to spend it on that. But this is basically an investment. This is you saying that this is worth it, just like this timing belt. This is you saying I don't want to have to deal with the expenses that are going to keep popping up along the way because I don't deal with this expense now. And I know that it is worth noting too that there's a lot of privilege in saying like, oh, just do these things and then those things cost money or it costs time, because not everybody has that kind of free time
Yeah.
or monetary resources available. But I think we can and should invest in our well-being regardless of where we find ourselves. I think everyone can modify what they're eating. To obviously, some people have much more ease of that than others. For most of the entire of my life, I've been, you know, not having monetary resources. Definitely grew up that way, was that way throughout college and after graduating. But still, I tried to make intentional choices about I don't want to have to, I shouldn't fry foods. I should, eat foods cooked in some other kind of a way. That's a simple switch that could improve my health and well-being. I want to be more physically active than sedentary. So if I can, I'd rather walk than have to drive or whatever it is. I'd rather take the stairs than go up the elevator. They sound trivial and they sound like simple little choices, but they do make very, very big differences in your well-being, especially across the entirety of your lifetime, like the entirety of you living your life in these kinds of ways. And if you make enough of these minute changes, none of which really cost me anything, if anything, it saves some money, it starts to become a different kind of a life. And I think that's the goal, not to switch your life over overnight, but to find yourself entering into, I'm living in a different version of myself. I'm living a different kind of a way. And now I get to reap all of the benefits of those things.
You and I have kind of been talking about this in an ongoing way for quite a while. And so I'm hoping that you can help me kind of make this next point because it's kind of a nuanced, difficult point. But the idea of your culture, again, one of the things, Ed Diener, the person that I mentioned before, he was one of the people, or is one of the people, who kind of talks about how like cultural differences that people experience change the way that they value things, change the way that they experience happiness because of the valuing of different
Hmm.
things. And so I think opportunity or availability,
Hmm.
sometimes those things are linked to cultures or experiences or place where you live or those kinds of things. So going back to that idea of like human beings or human becomings, well becoming, I think so much of who we are as people is interactional. We are relational beings. And so much of how we know how to relate to each other or how we choose to relate to each other is cultural. Can you help me nuance this a little bit around like how does culture intersect with this idea of well-being? Um,
Hmm.
do we truly all have the same opportunity, capability of achieving well-being?
That's a brilliant question. I'm always so terrible at citing where I have seen or read the things that come to mind. One day I'll get better at it. Maybe I'll just start carrying around a notebook or something I can write down like, oh, that's this thing is from this place or this person. I've come to understand culture as And I think there's a few people who write about it in this kind of a way, as an external form of kind of like genetic information, right? If you think of your genes as this is holding information about what people have needed, going back generations. They've needed to walk upright. They've needed dexterity in their hands. They've needed a certain amount of stamina. They've needed, all the things that get encoded into your DNA. These are the things that they've used to survive and hopefully even thrive and do well, and then pass on that information to the future generations. And culture, in a way, is that same kind of information, except it's outside of your cells. It's in your behaviors and the ways that you engage with the things around you, the people around you, the systems around you. It's information about what has helped people before you live pretty well and do the best that they could with circumstances that they're given. As brilliant as it is, I'm pretty sure I've pieced that together from some things that I've read somewhere else. No clue where or who, but if that's what culture is, that means that culture probably has something to say about how to live well. Different cultures probably have different things to say about how to live well. And I think that can be interpreted as they define what is well-being and wellness in probably differing ways, but they also define how to get to that end goal in slightly different ways. And you can look at that through something simple like food, where as human beings, we all kind of need the same basic things to achieve, some type of nutritional optimization. We need some form of carbohydrates for energy. We need all these basic vitamins and minerals. And then also we need protein. We need small bits of sugar and fat. And all these different cultures across the world throughout all these different millennia have figured out, if I piece together these different foods that are accessible to us, that helps me to check as many of those boxes off as possible with the least amount of work, in the most efficient way. And so you get all these different combinations from around the world. Some cultures are making pastas with this sauce, this vegetable, this meat in it. Some cultures are doing rice and beans. Lots of cultures, I think, have some variation of rice and beans, and you add a vegetable and you have some protein on the side. They all kind of combine, what is available to them, and they come up with their answer to how do I achieve this wellness thing. I think that's how culture starts to intertwine with well-being, is you look to what has been available to the culture that I come from, and how have we constructed an answer to giving us the thing that we need for our wellness. How do we check that box of I'm investing in and accomplishing what's necessary for my well-being? That being said, I think you just like, some genetic information needs to be activated or deactivated, right? Like sometimes there's things in your genome that it's advantageous or it's detrimental if that thing is turned on or turned off. Epigenetics and all that such, that's starting to stretch outside of my specific area of understanding, but there are things that could be encoded in your genetics as information that has been passed on to you, but you might not want that to be necessarily be turned on or engaged with. And I think the same thing can be true with culture. Maybe there's aspects that might be in your current circumstances. Maybe it's certain social evolution that we've had where things have changed enough, or certain new understandings of health, new contexts. We all have much more access to different types of food than, a lot of the cultures where we originated from used to have. And so eating as much rice as possible isn't the best strategy. Finding as much sugar resources as possible isn't the best strategy. So now you have to kind of engage with that culture in a way where you say, which components of this do I need to kind of modify or say don't need to be turned on or less intense, need to be de-intensified for me to actually really fully achieve whatever that well-being goal is. So I think that was a huge word salad of how culture starts to, I think, combine with, engage with well-being. But I think in the end, it's really, really important to remember that there's still choice in it, and you still should be really thoughtful and aware of how am I going to interact with my culture and well-being at the same time? How does my culture make sense of well-being? And then what are the answers that's come up for well-being? And then what do I need to do to say, I need that, I don't need that, this is better, this is worse. Here's all the little things that I need to kind of haggle and toggle with in order to really achieve whatever it is that you're trying to achieve.
It's really fascinating. I appreciate that explanation, and I totally agree with what you're saying. I think the other thing that it brings up for me is, and this is maybe where I'll disagree with a lot of what's been written and talked about as far as well-being before, but it's so often I think about well-being in a way that's when I'm not functioning well, I take a step back from my responsibilities, from my roles, from my whatever, and I just focus on me. I take care of me. I go, like you mentioned before, I go to the spa, I take a rest day, oftentimes we say like I'm taking a mental health day, and basically that means like I sit at home and I do nothing and I lay in bed and I watch Netflix all day long, and that's what has become synonymous to like a mental health day. What that does is it diverts all of my outward looking perspective and it shifts it to now like I only look at me. I'm just attending to what's going on for me. And I think because we're such relational beings and because we've created a society where I can't self sustain, right? If I wanted to feed myself, I don't have a garden. I can't go out and get some food. I live in a city, so going to hunt for meat is probably not feasible. I'm relying on farmers and truckers and grocery store attendants and all of these things just to get food. Simply being self-reliant is almost impossible in the society that we've created. But yet when we talk about like wellness and well-being and self-care, it's like I take care of me. And I think that perspective is probably a bit faulty. And I think just like you were highlighting just now around like culture and society, we're influenced by who we are and the people around us and the belief system and all of those kinds of things. But I also think if we take that even to like one step bigger, when we start to bring these cultures together, there becomes even a greater richness. There becomes a greater possibility that if you bring the foods that you eat and I bring the foods that I eat, collectively, we now have way more resources. We have many more options. We have whatever. And so I think that's one of the things that I think is really valuable too, is that self-care might be misnamed. That when I need care, turning outward, letting people in, appreciating what other people have, accessing resources that are outside of myself, being able to be taken care of. All of those things can facilitate our well-being. And so I think that's one of the things that I would say is there's great benefit in being surrounded by culture, of my own culture, of being supported and uplifted through my own culture. But there's also great benefit in experiencing and drawing on other cultures. It's almost like the bigger we can make our circle, the more well we can be. Because in moments where we struggle a bit, there's more resources to draw on. In the vein of prevention, just having this worldwide community allows me to prevent mishaps in other areas. And so I think that's one of the things that I hope that we come back to a lot in this is oftentimes well-being is pinned on me as an individual. I need to fix my own well-being. I need to preserve my own well-being. I need to be self-reliant. And I think a big part of this is actually being okay to reach out, being okay to access what other people bring to the table, finding value in all of the differences that exist, and saying perhaps that difference is exactly what I need in a moment where I don't feel at my best.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that we can kind of, when we think about culture in that way, we also can kind of think about this isn't self-oriented, this is us-oriented.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. The thing that kept coming to mind while you were describing this is like to build you back up. Maybe it's not that you need to disengage. You might need to engage differently. You might need to figure out a different way of getting these needs met and sustaining yourself and building yourself up through how you're interconnected to what's around you, who's around you, the systems around you. Because like you said, you are inevitably dependent on people and systems that you're connected to. Everybody has been since the dawn of the species in some kind of a way. And so it's your relationship to those things that basically make up the fabric of your life. And I don't think isolating yourself or disappearing or trying to go find the answer in some singular, individual, isolated kind of a way is really going to bring you the satisfaction that you're looking for. I think there's plenty that we all can do to make decisions, in an individual sense, that might promote us moving in the right direction. But I think it's that engagement and changing your relationship to the things around you that's probably going to make a huge difference for you. In fact, I mean, we can all just feel the meaning that kind of comes from when we try to take a step, but it involves another person in whatever kind of a way. Even just in a health and fitness kind of a way. You make those goals with another person. It feels like, well, now I'm really a part of something. Now I really have even more motivation for it, or accountability in the very least. Now I have a system that is bigger than myself. And now I'm that much more involved and dedicated to this thing. That's almost instantly a part of your life now, rather than a thing you're kind of dipping your toe in. It's not just a New Year's resolution. It's not just a neat little thing you're trying. This is a process that I've now signed myself up for and a part of, because I'm a part of a social system somehow.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you want to make sure we get to about why focus on well-being?
We got to save some for the next few episodes. If we do it all now, it'll just be one long episode and nothing else.
All right. Well, then hopefully that was helpful for you all to think about, like, why focus on well-being. And so I guess I would just say, as you leave here today, think about that, engage with that, go become more well, focus on prevention, focus on being proactive rather than reactive, focus on connecting with others outside of yourself, go become well.